If I'd have known these 3 lessons earlier, I could have saved myself and my team so much time and frustration. Welcome back, everybody. My name's Andy Hiles.
And my name is Steve Trapps. We are both Scrum trainers with Scrum.org and Kanban trainers with Pro Kanban. So we thought we would share with you 3 game-changing lessons we wish that we had known earlier on in our careers as Scrum Masters. So Andy, 3 things. What do you think we should be sharing?
So should we start off with metrics?
Start with metrics. This is something that I wish that I had fallen back on. It's an early start of my career. I mean, as a Scrum Master, I've had lots of conversations with various different people thinking it can't be done or it can be done if this happens. And often having the right metrics enables you to have those conversations in which that when you have that gut feel, it just feels a bit tight. But if you can't prove why that gut feel is there, it's really difficult to have conversations with people who are under pressure themselves and wanting you to deliver. So, using techniques as story points, and we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. Story points are useful, but may not give you what you need or what you think they may need. But actually having empirical data behind you to say, yeah, that's possible, or right now, that's not. I wish I'd stumbled across that data before. Andy, have you used the data in the past to help drive conversations with people, or?
I think I have, Steve. I wrote the book. But yeah, so it's an interesting one in terms of what are we trying to measure by looking at flow metrics, and we're trying to get some kind of stability within how we understand the team are doing with regards to making stuff, right? Building stuff. Are they predictable? Are they reliable? Is it consistent? Because, this is the whole kind of concept behind flow. When you think about the kind of the ease of process, ideally, it's kind of what we'd like to think, but it's work is contextual, work is complex. And so it's not always building the same widget. You can look at the kind of the measures and metrics from that perspective. But there are other metrics, right?
So I'm curious, why doesn't Scrum talk about this? It doesn't talk about metrics, it's based on empiricism. But in the guide, it doesn't really help in any way, I don't think, does it?
Well, so I mean, it clearly does help. I mean, if you don't measure anything, Scrum has the increment, right? It's the only measure it measures. That's a good statement, isn't it? Right. So, but if it pushes, like anything, if you push, it's one of the criticisms, of Scrum, particularly, that it is so open to interpretation. Yeah. That people my version of Scrum is very different to your version of Scrum, right? It's one way of looking at it. So if Scrum said, well, use these measures, then those would be the only measures that would be used. You would probably ignore things like psychological safety as a measure, potentially. You would probably ignore things like on product index, as a measure, because Scrum doesn't say so. And so these are one of the kind of, the positives and the criticism of Scrum, because it is so loose in those kind of guidances that it leaves a lot for interpretation, and that's why there's so many like your Scrum isn't my Scrum stuff going on.
So I suppose what we're saying is have a look at those metrics that you are recording, have a look at the conversations you're wanting to have, and do you have anything in your history, in your empirical data that helps you have those conversations, that backs up those gut feelings?
What's the next one?
Getting to know people outside of your team, directors, stakeholders, and start building relationships with them. This is a pivotal thing. You need to, you don't work in isolation, so you need to be able to have conversations with people. You need to be talking to them and hearing what's going on in their world.
I think it quite simply follows on from the metrics thing. Is the kind of the metrics that you choose to report out on, or the metrics that the only things potentially that those people will consume. So if you're saying, we've only language, brilliant. We've delivered, not only we've delivered, right? It's subtlety in English, right? But therein lies a problem, right? How you communicate measures to stakeholders. If that is the only touch point, if that is the only point that they are interacting with your team, those are the only things they are going to know and pick up on. Whereas building that relationship, spending time to get to know them, could be far more powerful, could be far more beneficial for the team in the long run and yourself, right? You can go and express concerns openly and honestly. if you can.
And hopefully the people you're talking to will actually, you'll learn as a Scrum Master what pressure they're under, why their behaviors, and actually it's going back to those metrics again, what those behaviors, why they're behaving that way, what pressure are they under, and hopefully they will share with you, and then you can help the team to deliver what is their pressure points, those kinds of things. But if you don't work in isolation, we work in the business. I know we have IT or delivery, then the business, but it's just the business. So we should be working with people, getting to know people outside the team, and do it, and don't be scared. But anyway, let's move on.
Okay, go for it.
Scrum isn't everything. Andy, what do you mean by Scrum isn't everything? We're Scrum Masters. We're Scrum trainers. Scrum isn't everything. What are you talking about there?
So this was my fault. I picked this one, which was, when you start out as a Scrum Master, it's quite very different. Very different for you, very different for the organization. Not so much nowadays. I guess most organizations have some idea of what Agile and Scrum are. But when I started out, I remember Scrum being completely alien to everybody. I mean, it really was. This is 2008. It was really alien to everybody. I come from an XP world, where we knew, to get around a table in the morning and have a conversation about the work. But the rigor of Scrum in terms of its planning, and the events was so alien, and the language use was very alien, But the realization that Scrum isn't the answer to everything, and actually it's far smarter and better to talk about, as you probably noticed, in a previous chat or this one, that I've tried to take Scrum out of the equation. When you're trying to convey what are simple behavioral topics, take Scrum out of the equation. So let's ignore that for a minute, right? What is the essence of the problem that we're trying to go and solve? And then it's, can Scrum help us here? What does Scrum say about this? And it'll probably sit within the values or sit within the empirical framework, but there will be probably a tie to Scrum, and also you might decide that Scrum isn't the thing, right? So Scrum isn't the right framework to go and apply in this context. And actually, being very clear and decisive about what you are going to do and how you're going to work, but you also being very clear that, while it might sound we're doing Scrum, we're actually not doing Scrum because we don't have a Scrum Master, we don't have a product owner. We're going to take that accountability as part of what we're doing.
The key thing is to flag it when you are not doing those things and say, hey, let's not call it Scrum because it's not Scrum, because we don't have a product owner, we don't have X, Y, and Z. However, we're getting some benefits of coming together regularly each day to talk about our progress towards a goal. We're getting regular benefits, or getting benefits of sitting down with our stakeholders, building up those rapport with people and hearing what their problems are. And I say this quite a lot, is no one really cares how you deliver their stuff. They just want their stuff.
So I was thinking of the worst versions I've come across where previous incarnations of, I'll call them Agile transformation specialists, whatever that is, have come in and burnt the organization in terms of Scrum, and Kanban. And actually those terms become prohibited, both versions of that word. That you can't use, but you end up doing one of them either, one of them in the same way. And it's just quite an amusing little situation that you find yourself in, is you kind of like, we're going to go into a collaboration meeting, but the senior executives we're not allowed to call it, whatever.
It's been deemed that we can't.
And I just think
a daily or something along those lines. So we have to come up with a new term for it, because we're not doing Scrum, because Scrum failed us last time.
But so I think just there's an acknowledgement of Scrum doesn't always fit in every situation, and I think that's the lesson I want people to take away here. It's okay to say Scrum isn't working, let's go and do whatever it looks like, and making that cool, but making it very explicit.
The 3 things: use data, use empirical data to drive conversations, build relationships with stakeholders and key people within your area, and the final one is Scrum isn't everything.